Please be seated. A few months ago, I decided I wanted to learn some new skills. I'd been thinking about it for a while, and so while I was on vacation, I started out to learn these new skills. Now, in a past life, and I'm sure you can remember this sort of time, if I had had that desire and had made that a focus of what I was going to do, I would have looked around to find a class, perhaps, that I could attend. But more than likely, what I would have done I would have gone to a library or to a bookstore. And more than likely, it would have been a bookstore, just because that's how I am. And there at the bookstore, I would have found whatever resources I needed to help me learn this skill. And I would have bought the books, I would have gone home, and I would have researched and read through the books to find out what I needed to know and how to do this, and then gone to practice it. That's not what I did. I Googled it. Admit it, you do that too. You can find all kinds of resources, some of them not so appropriate, but you can find all kinds of resources when you Google things. So what I did and what I wound up doing was something that I often do, is I went to one of those video places on the web. And I went there and I began to find videos by people who were teaching how to do these skills that I wanted to learn. And it's wonderful. I've got to tell you, this works a lot better for me, and it's a lot less expensive than buying books. And then I don't have them hanging around that I've got to deal with. But I would watch these videos, and then another one would pop up, and I would watch it, and I was getting all of these ideas, and I was getting excited about being able to do these things, and I'm imagining how I'm going to do them. And I'm just coming along wonderfully with this whole thing. So as I'm watching these videos, at some point, another type of video began to pop up. And they were videos with titles like, "With learning this skill, I made $100,000 last year." "With this skill, I now support my family." Now, I know better. It reminded me ultimately of the back of comic books when I was a kid. You know, where you could buy the sea monkeys? But invariably there was also an ad there, "Make money doing this." Usually it was delivering newspapers. But there was always something there about making money, getting rich, doing this very little stuff, or this new skill that you're learning. Now, I had no intention of making any money doing this. It was something I wanted to learn to do, and I thought maybe it's something that can help with my work with the church too. Those kinds of things. I mean, you weren't number one in there, but you were in there. And then I began to realize it's all the same thing. And that here I am. I've got a good living. I can make it just fine. But somehow, even though I'm a person who has, I'm being seduced by the idea that I can have more. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that to you. In our gospel reading today, we encounter the parable of the dishonest steward, or the dishonest manager. That's the name we give this parable from Luke. And it follows immediately from the readings we did last week. You remember where Jesus was talking to these folks, and the Pharisees and the scribes were there, and he was telling these parables that identified that the Pharisees and the scribes were putting legalities and rituals ahead of people. Well, this week, it's kind of like he's saying, here's these folks, and they're putting money ahead of people. But here's the parable. It's Jesus said there was this steward, this manager, and he got the idea that he was going to get canned, that his boss was going to fire him. So in order to set things up for himself, he goes to each of these tenant farmers and he says, how much do you owe them? And they said, so-and-so, 100 gallons. And he said, make that 50. Because what he was trying to do, the parable tells us, Jesus tells us, he was trying to get favor with them so that he would have a place to go sleep when he got fired. And so he does this. Now, I don't know what your reaction is to this parable, but when I read it, I don't much care for it. I don't like this guy. After all, he is betraying his employer, the one who pays his salary. And I don't like that. But let me tell you the backstory to this. And let's see if that affects how we may receive it. In 2nd century Palestine, these folks were under Roman rule. You know that. We talk about it a lot. And when the Romans rolled into town, they did a lot of things. Mostly they would let you continue to worship whatever gods. They really didn't care about that. You could do that, but they began to take over in some very concrete ways. But one of the things they always did was they began to build these great buildings in honor of the gods and the emperor. Now, they didn't have money to do. Well, they did have the money, but they weren't going to use theirs. So what did they do? They levied taxes on everyone. On everyone. That's where Joseph and Mary were going, remember? So what would happen? They'd levy these taxes on folks, and these folks who owned this land, these farms, these places that had been handed down often by generations, they would tax them, and they would get behind in their taxes. Now, I am talking about 2nd century Palestine. Let's just be clear. They would get behind in their taxes, and then someone who was wealthy from somewhere far away would come up and they would say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to help you out. I have got a deal for you. And here it is. I'm going to buy your farm for pennies on the dollar. And I'm going to pay off your taxes. But you'll get a little something out of it. Oh, by the way, I know your family's been here for a long time, and that these people who work for you, you have relationships with them. I want you to stay on as my tenant farmer. So you'll have work, you'll have a place to be. Oh, by the way, the other thing is that every year when you come to harvest, you give me a percentage of your harvest that I can then sell and make money off of too. Now, they didn't want to get their hands dirty going up and getting the money. So like Tony Soprano or the government, they would hire somebody to go collect these taxes, these harvests. That's this guy. He's the one going on behalf of the wealthy folks in order to get what was owed to them. But he's found out he's going to be fired, and he's got to do something. Now, I don't know about you. He's still not one of my favorite people in the Bible, but it does affect how I began to see Him. Because it's almost as if in this parable, Jesus is saying He may not fully get it, but at least now He's understanding that people are involved. He's beginning to see the other side of this thing going on. And what I began to realize is that this is a parable about economic justice. I don't know, I'm sure you caught it, that this story, as much as it is rooted in 2nd century Palestine, is the story of the family farms in the 20th century America, where a similar kind of thing happened and corporations came in and bought them out. Some of them stayed there as tenant farmers, some of them had to leave. And I began to realize that this whole thing, this thing of economy, this thing of economic justice is there in front of us at all times. It's not just simply about farms. It's not about land. It's about the fact that when I went online and looked at this stuff and I got stimulated to make money by doing these kinds of things, I can do that because I already have. And because the system within which I live encourages me to do that. But that there are many, many, many people in this country, in this world, for whom the system works against them. It does not offer them the freedom to do what I could do. As one who has, I can get more, but those who don't have often cannot bring it themselves. You know, as much as I don't like this fellow in this parable, I find him a little too close to home for comfort. Jesus tells us, you choose who you worship, and how you live shows who you worship. And in a world where there is any hope of living out God's reign, we are invited into a world where we work for the justice in the economy as well as other places. And that the thing I have to do, it's my realization, is that I have to first get out of the way of those who have not. And I must work to change the system that keeps them down. Now, I'd really rather not do that. I would rather just continue to build my own and do for myself. But I'm reminded that God's kingdom is a kingdom of equality. It is a kingdom where we are all loved and accepted and held as everyone else. And that if one experiences injustice, we all experience injustice until it is changed. I shall continue to develop my new skills. They're fun. I shall probably at some point move out and develop some others. And as a confession, I will probably again be tempted to feather my own nest. But I hope God will continue to challenge me through parables like this and through what I see in life to remember that we are all God's children, held together by the love of God, not the economy of anything else. and that as long as we love God, we love others. Amen.